Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, for starters tonight, we have Leanne Gomes and Human Services and the other agencies to start off tonight. John, is there any comments you'd like to preface?
I'm going to save my voice a little bit, so I'm going to turn it over to Leanne.
Great. Okay. Thank you, John. This is such a stressful time for all of us, you and us and our staff included. And I just want to say at the beginning that if there's any way to avoid doing the 5% scenario, we would greatly appreciate that. That is the most stressful part of this whole process, I think, is when people see line items on, different scenarios. It's just so stressful. So I'm hoping that you can get through the budget this year without that exercise, because it's so painful to our staff, and I really want to try to avoid that. I have the hardest working staff, I think, in the whole city, and I think we generate some of the most revenue, and I'm so proud of all the work that they do. And we are at such bare bones with personnel that we can't afford not even one little tiny cut to personnel, and there's not much else left to cut. So I gave you a PowerPoint. I sent it to you. I apologize if some of you couldn't open it, but I've left some up at the counter for you there. And I'm just going to kind of go through this. I'm going to use this as my guideline to kind of explain our departments. And I'm going to save time for you at the end because I have Angelo, Cheryl, and Katrina with me here. Mike Wolak had a death in the family and was not able to come tonight, but we'll go through his stuff too. So. Our department really is focused on the quality of life, and a lot of these slides are the same slides that we've given you before, so I'm going to kind of just fast forward and cut to the chase. There's a slide that says our community, and we've given you some updated demographics from Town Profiles and the 2016 United Way report about what the makeup of the community looks like, and why we have the social service needs that we have, and why people struggle to do rec activities sometimes, and all of that, and why we need the level of services that we have in Norwich. I've given you a slide that has our requested budget and what's proposed, and a lot of our departments got almost everything they wanted. The outlier is the recreation department, and we'll go through that. In the last 10, 11 years, our divisions in our department have been cut. The senior center, 10%, rec department, 28%, youth and family services, 33%, and adult and family, 55%. So that's why I say we're at bare bones. We can't afford any personnel cuts. We're as lean as we can be. Adult and family services, this is a pretty easy budget to go through for you. I've given you some of the functions that we do there. We had 2 fires in Norwich this week. We're working with those families to replace them. We went out with the building department on some hoarding issues this week. We're really a support and backbone to a lot of the other city departments that we have. And we do specialized things. I don't know if you read the article about Jocelyn Jean-Pierre, the Haitian woman who's been in Bacchus Hospital for 2 years, and we're trying desperately to get her out and doing some good work there. We generate revenue for residents. We do a lot of grants. Katrina behind me is writing grants almost on a daily basis to fund necessary things, our kinship respite program, our widows program, backpacks and uniforms and all of that. And we're still the lead agency on homelessness for the upper half of New London County, and we do a great job with our work education and training programs. Last year we got 5 kids through the manufacturing pipeline. We train CNAs, we raise the income of people, and that's one of our main goals, is to make people self-sufficient and raise their income. What we requested for adult and family was a part-time receptionist. That's not proposed, and I understand why the council doesn't want to add positions to the budget, and the manager wants to add an IT person, and I totally agree with that. But we had asked for a part-time employee because of the volume of work.
Could you speak up, please, or speak
Oh,
into the
I'm sorry. We asked for a part-time receptionist because we have been patching together our reception area for years, as all of our divisions have been doing. Last quarter, we had 1,000 walk-ins to our little office over there, and 500 new cases. There's a lot of support work that needs to be done. There's a lot of clerical functions and things that we shouldn't have social workers or employment people doing, and we think that a part-time receptionist is warranted. And then the only other little thing that supplies got reduced a little bit, but that was it for adult and families. That's all we thought we needed there. Under Youth and Family Services, Angelo behind me does a great job with this division. We are the premier juvenile justice review board in the state of Connecticut in partnership with the Norwich Police Department. They do a lot of positive youth development and programming, the Teen Leadership Council, and organizing community events like Family Day and different community forums on opioid use and the like. We have a great partnership with the Norwich Police Department called it's the Joining Forces Youth Program. And we do all the summer youth employment and youth mentoring and education. We're poised to hire about 100 kids under summer youth employment this year. And that really, is youth's entree into the world of work, and we're very proud of the work that we do there. Angelo's division brought in over $500,000 this year alone on grants. We have the 2 major grants addressing the opioid issue, and thank you, Sam, for working with us on that. And we're partnering with the Norwich Fire Department and the Heroin Task Force to actually go out to the homes of people that overdose and knock on their doors and see if they're okay and get them recovery coaches and really make sure that they and their families have the services they need. So I think that's one of the major endeavors that we're doing under Youth and Family Services. We asked to transfer some utility cost over to their division, but it was kept under the rec department as they share the building, and we're fine with that. And I've given you some great pictures of different events that are happening. And then at our senior center, as I said, Mike had a death in his family unexpectedly and couldn't be here tonight, but you all know the great job Mike Wallach does at our senior center, and you've all been to events there. He had over 11,000 visits this quarter. They did over 3,500 transports this quarter. They do outstanding programming and community events. Mike asked for a new escort car, which was proposed. We've been using old donated Impala that has almost $200,000 miles on it, and we can't get parts for that vehicle anymore. So we were really happy to see that that is proposed, and we hope that that stays in the budget. And Mike, too, asked for a full-time receptionist. They, too, have a lot of people coming up to the desk, a lot of support tasks that need to be done, phones to be answered. They schedule medical transport. They do the Voices brochure. And they've been down at that staff position for, I think, 5 years now. So again, we would love to increase the staffing there. Mike had asked for some more help with the seasonal temporaries. We requested to go from 4,000 to 8,000, which was what his budget had been before last year's budget. And that fund is used to hire per diem drivers when our drivers are sick and call out, because we can't stop the transportation that we do at the Rose City Senior Center. That's something that we do Monday through Friday, and it's vital to the seniors that use the center, so we'd love to see that restored. And then this was a big ticket item, but when it snows at the senior center and snow accumulates on the top of the vehicles, Mike literally gets up on a ladder with a broom and pushes the snow off. We've desperately been trying to figure out where we can park the vehicles, the taller vehicles, the buses, and we've investigated every place in the city, and nobody has room for that. And it's really dangerous for Mike to continue to do what he does, and he's the only one at the senior center that would do that. We even tried to run the buses through the car wash to see if the car wash would take the snow off. But we looked at temporary solutions like a carport kind of thing, and we're not zoned for that. We can't do that. So we're still looking for solutions to that. I understand that's a $150,000 item, and it might not get funded this year, but we need to have some place to park the buses or some covering for the longevity of the buses and the safety of our staff up there. So I asked you to keep that in mind. Okay, and now we're on to the Recreation Department. I was thinking it's a blessing and a curse to have the new rec director, because it's a blessing because she knows what she's doing and she was able to take a look at all of our fields and facilities. It's kind of a curse because she can point out everything we're deficient in and everything that's a safety issue, and she has gone through the city and has done that with all of our fields, and she has a list of things that really, really need to get done. And you saw a lot of those on the capital budget and the capital improvement plan. There are legitimately some things that, could create some real issues for our youth on equipment, and we just want to have those addressed. So that's why, I felt it was important to put in the budget all of her requests. Her budget is going from 670, I think, to 8 something, and I know that's a big jump, but like I said, it's because she's done a thorough evaluation of all of the facilities and all of the needs at the rec department, and we want those to be considered. So I'll go through, well, let me say first that they're doing some really great programming at the rec. They're doing have a new program for kids with special needs that we're really proud of. They're doing a lot of community events. This Sunday's Easter egg hunt. We have the Splash and Dash, and if you've ever been to Mohegan Park for that event, it's just wonderful. They did the first ever trunk or treat, and you have some great pictures in there. That was so well attended. It was unbelievable down at the marina. So they're doing a lot more than we have before with the same staff. We're scheduling more leagues. More people are asking for usage on our fields. We're doing tournaments which generate revenue and bring that into our department. And we're actually putting some fields back online that we really haven't used in a long time because, the usage, the demand is so high. So they're doing all this new work, all this extra work with bare bone staff and a bare bone budget, and we want to get them up so that things can be improved and we can keep in the forward direction and the progress that we're making at the rec. So Cheryl's given you, and it's in very tiny print because there were so many accomplishments, and I hope you have a minute sometime this week to read through those. And we've given you some great photos of some of the programs that are going on at the rec. And then her goals and priorities. She has a lot of ideas, a lot of plans and goals for the future, but we need more staff to accomplish those. If she's tasked, or Bob, our program administrator, is tasked with answering phones, they can't get to some of the higher level things that we could be doing. Our program administrator really is a person that stays with the programs and works a lot of nights and weekends, so he's not so much an office person. And we want Cheryl to be doing the higher level things. We've really been patching together the receptionist position, and we've kind of got chastised by our HR department because we've, put an intern, and then we have a seasonal, and then we have elderly worker, and we're just trying to patch things together to cover that position. And this is a position that I feel that we really need. Imagine what we could do at the rec if we were staffed up there. So that's one of our main requests at the rec department, is a full-time receptionist. Another thing that is in the budget, in the request but not proposed, was bumping Cheryl's salary back up to 89.7, I think that says. There were 4 other positions in the budget. My understanding is this, I haven't had a chance to vet this, but my understanding is that other positions whose hours were cut back a little bit have been restored in the budget, and we'd like the same consideration for Cheryl. We'd like to see if we can get her up to the dollar amount that would fund her position at 35 rather than 31 hours because of the work that she's doing and the time that she needs to spend at the rec department. So that, we have the receptionist, and then last year we lost a full-time maintainer. We'd like to see that back in the budget too. As I said, more people are requesting fields. There's more going on at the rec. more fields that have been put online, and if we don't fill the full-time maintainer, and additionally, we cut the 4 seasonal maintainers, which is proposed too, we will really be at a deficit as far as keeping the fields up and running, functioning, and safe. One of our maintainers right now is on disability, so we're really short-staffed now. We think that the seasonal maintainers are vital. We have enough money in our budget this year, right? We saved money to hire some maintainers in April to work through the end of the budget year. We would hate to have to lay them off July 1st because the 4 maintainers that we were proposed in our budget got slashed. That, we think, is a vital thing. We prefer the full-time maintainer because seasonals cannot run heavy equipment and do a lot of the work that's needed up there, but we implore you to consider one of these 2 things, either the full-time maintainer or the 4 seasonals. We think they're equally important, but if we had our druthers, I suppose we'd want the full-time maintainer. Professional services were reduced proposed by 2,000. We requested equipment and furniture, which was decreased by about 12,000. That's about the cost of a new software system. If you've gone online to register for programs at the rec, you will see why we need a new software system. It's a very old system, and it's patched, as I understand it, and it's not intuitive, and it's not customer-friendly. And Cheryl's done some work investigating systems, and that's about the price we think we would need for a system that would allow people to register and pay online and save us a lot of time and grief. We requested building repairs in the amount of $42,000. Those funds would help us. So there's 7 playgrounds that need a foot of mulch. It's $2,000 a playground, so that's $14,000. And there's $33,000 of facility repairs that need to be done at Jennings, Ouellette, and Hamilton. And again, this was through Cheryl's efforts to evaluate things, and we really need money in the building repair budget to get these done. Mileage and dues subscriptions and overtime were decreased. We'll go to bat for overtime because the maintainers are, because we're so short-staffed with the maintainers, they're working more hours, they're working on the weekends. It's a physically demanding job, 10 hours of back-breaking work on fields and everything is very hard for our guys. And if we can break it up and have them work 8-hour days and then work a little bit on the weekend to get the job done, that would be great. There was a big NFA game last night, and it rained, and the field was wet, and the infield was wet, and we had to spend a lot of time getting that ready for our sports leagues. And the guys do such a great job, and they're so short-staffed. We'd really like to see some overtime money and some help for them up there. But we're trying to be really innovative in searching for other ways to fund the needs that we have at this department. We have gotten the Sunrise Rotary to fund $5,000 worth of amenities at Mohegan Park Beach. They're going to be able to purchase some sand for the beach and some picnic table benches, and maybe a sink for the lifeguard stand, and maybe some signage up there. And we're really proud of our work with the Rotary Club to get that accomplished. And then for the first time in many, many years, I'm not sure if the rec has done it before, but we applied for a CDBG grant to take some things off of the capital improvement list and get them funded in a different means. So we are recommended for $90,000 for repair of resurfacing of 2 basketball courts in Taffel. And I know there might be some other plans that Taffel has for that, but we think we can have a win-win situation there and get the parking lot and the court in the same place and bring those courts back up to a pristine level where we can run tournaments and generate revenue for the city and for the department. And the next page is just other projects that are proposed to be funded in the capital budget. Last year, we received about $100,000 in funding for capital improvements. This year, it's at $77,000, but we do appreciate how many projects were proposed to be funded, and that will go a long way to help us bring stuff up to code. And then I'm just showing you the revenue brought in by our different divisions, and like I said, with the right staff, we could increase that a lot more. We bring in about 47% more than no, I'm not saying that right. Our combined divisions leverage an additional 47% beyond what the city allocates. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about our divisions. So that's a lot. Just want to turn to my guys and see if they want to add to anything I've said, or good? Okay, thanks.
We start on senior center on page 99. I don't have any comments.
I'm sorry, you do or you do not have any
I
comments?
do not.
Members? Alderman Philbrick?
I have a couple of questions. My first question is, Leanne, did you prepare all these budgets, or did the department heads prepare them and submit them to you for review?
The department has prepared them and submitted me for review.
Okay. Senior Center, where are the utilities in this budget?
The utilities for the senior center are actually paid from the Public Works Building Maintenance account.
I'm sorry, what page are they on?
They're paid in the Public Works Building Maintenance account under Utilities Other. It would probably make sense to put that into the city senior center's budget. It's just an artifact from years and years and years ago.
Josh, you know, the longer I sit here, the more confused I get. You just said they probably should be. Then why aren't they? Why aren't they? Is this the only department that doesn't have utilities listed? My second question is, can you tell me, Leanne, how long Mike has been the department head at the senior center? How many years he's been there?
I can't. I don't know. I think it's in the teens.
So he's been there more than a year or two.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so his projected proposed and requested salary is $78,144. I need for you to tell me why, for someone who's been there for, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say a decade, should make $78,144, whereas someone who's coming in as the rec director, going from a part-time to a full-time, requested almost $90,000 and is still putting in for 78. I don't understand, and I've never understood this in the city.
They're set by contract, and it has nothing to do with the department head.
So these
They're
are
set-
contracts,
Yeah. It's all
personal contracts or union contracts?
union contracts. It has nothing to do with me. I don't set the salaries. That's all set based on, and Angelo's a union guy. He probably could speak more to this than me.
The senior center is set by MEIU union. It was negotiated with the city. That's where those salaries were all set by, as was the rec director's salary. So that's all set by the MEIU union that negotiated with the city and set those salaries.
Okay, the last comment I'm going to make is, and I know it's not going to win me any friends, but I'm at the point in my life where I really don't care. I find it sort of ironic, Leanne, that your department is the Human Services, and in your statistics you talk about the number of people that live below the poverty level, the number of senior citizens on fixed incomes, and yet you present a budget that is highly aggressive. And I just wonder how you balance or how you rectify the fact that you want the citizens, the taxpayers, to pay more and more and more, And yet the taxpayers are historically becoming less and less able to maintain it. Where,
Okay. I feel it's my job to present you with the needs of my divisions. I live in Norwich. I pay the taxes that you guys set. So do I want to keep taxes as low as possible? Yes, I do. I work with poor people all day, every day. I want to keep taxes as low, but I feel that in this process, it's my job to present you with the needs of the departments, and we have been cut year after year after year. And that's all I can do, is show you where the need is, and then I turn it over to you and the city manager to make the decisions.
it's just, it seems that, I don't know, I don't get it. I don't get it. I have to tell you that, quite honestly. In my opinion, the utilities for a true, transparent, the utilities for the senior, where are the utilities for the building that Angelo is in, for example?
So it's under the rec department.
Those are under the rec
And
department.
because it's one building, and we asked for the utilities to be reflected in Youth and Family Services budget, but I think for ease, it's just easier to keep it there. But it's only 1 meter, so we couldn't really apportion what they're using compared to what it's the same building, it's 1 meter.
So there is no meter at the senior center?
There is a meter, we can move that one.
I'm sorry?
There is a meter for the senior center, we can move that under the senior center budget.
I just, we are trying desperately to hold the line here, and I just don't know anymore. I really don't. I know that there's a need in the community. You know very well that I personally, and I would like to use anecdotal information, when I needed help, there was no help for me. And that sticks in my craw. So I'm one person. How many other people out there need help and don't get it? And yet somebody can, I'm in a group with several ladies who came from Rhode Island to Norwich, and when I asked them why, their short answer was because it's easy to get the best benefits here, which is a compliment, but it's also a...
But I think you might be confusing state and city human services.
No, they
because-
were specific.
Okay. I would love to see their names and see what benefits they receive from our office, because I don't think it's easy at all. We've been cut. We don't have a lot to give in the first place, but I would love to talk to you more about that.
All right, and as I say, there's just so much of the pie to go around, and
Yes.
this is another very, very difficult year.
Yeah. Yes.
Pro Tem Nash.
I just have a quick question, that some of it's to Josh. First, the rec department, there was requested not funded professional services that were reduced by 2,000. What professional services were reduced? I mean, what are those professional services?
That was the closing of Oulette Gate. We closed Oulette Gate. I'll let Cheryl say this.
Oulette has a gate that had to be closed every night and on the weekends after hours because youth leagues and adults are in there. We looked at changing that policy, leaving the gate open, so that's where the funding was cut. Yet, we did have vandalism when we made that decision, so
So the professional service was somebody closing that gate?
we were paying
Gotcha.
someone each night and weekend, but we now have had vandalism, so
Yeah.
I kind of hope I have the money to pay someone to close it again.
Gotcha. And the other one, to Alderwoman Philbrooks, maybe Josh can explain, there's a lot of budgets in the different department heads that aren't reflected in their particular budget, and you have it in a general budget fund, for instance, snow removal, some of the field, some building maintenances, because I also noticed on the senior center, there's no line for landscaping or anything like that, so I'm assuming the city does it, someone's paying for it, but it's not in their budget, just like the snow removal is in a main budget versus, because I know when I first got on, the parking commission paid for snow removal for city lots, and it didn't make any sense that the city was giving them money to pay the other department to remove the snow, and it just didn't seem logical. So I don't know, maybe you can address that there are other departments that as well that are in a general budget. It's not reflected in theirs.
Yeah, it's, you know, the line items kind of developed over time, and I think for a number of years, it was whoever managed the work, the money was in their budget. And, you know, I agree with Alderwoman Philbrick. I'd rather have line items be grouped together with who's benefiting from the goods and services, because then you know the full cost of running a senior center or running a rec department. In the case of the utilities between youth and family services and recreation, though, I don't think it's worth paying whatever it is to put another meter in so you can measure that. But moving senior center utilities into their budget is, you know, that makes sense.
I wasn't questioning that. I was just
Yep.
saying that there are other pockets of budgets that don't reflect in the, okay.
Yeah,
That's all.
I mean, fleet maintenance is a classic example, because you'd have, you could have auto supplies in all the volunteer fire departments, paid career fire department, and, but really it's them managing the repairs for the whole fleet, so.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions? Alderman Delucia.
This might be a question for Mr. Salamone. So just help me understand that in the 2019-20 proposed budget for the Director of Recreation, it's a $9,500 difference between the salaries heading and the salaries paid by the general fund. Where does the other $9,500 come from?
The difference?
Yeah, it's $9,500. Where does
The
it come from?
difference is less hours paid.
So that $9,500 is the difference between a 1.0 FTE and a .89 FTE? Is that
Yes.
where that was arrived at?
Yes.
So this is going to sound a little pointed, but, and why are we cutting that down to 0.89? What's the rationale behind making that
It was
decision?
the same last year. It was just continued this year at the same rate.
No, I don't see that. I see that in the,
What page are you on now, Lou?
I'm looking at page 107.
We're going to jump around, okay?
You're right.
So in 2018-19, this budget year, it's a 1.0 FTE. Is it not?
Yes,
I didn't think so,
yeah,
but
it really was .89. That's an error. It was .89 last year. So,
well, that's a small discrepancy, and
Yeah.
I don't want to focus on that or take
Okay.
up any more time on that. My point is that I'm wondering why we're doing that. So I'll ask it directly. Did that become a .89 last year and carry over to a .89 this year, so there would be salary parity between the Director of
Yes.
Department of Recreation and the head of the
and the senior center director, yes.
Okay, so as a union person, I have an issue with that
Yep.
because the MEIU contract says those positions pay what they pay, right? And what, you know, it's almost like a shell game to scale it back, right? I also agree to a certain degree with Alderwoman Philbrick that there should be some parity, right? If your four divisions all have a department head, right, then the scale should be the same for all of them. They're principally doing the same job, you know, under your department, right?
Right. What the director of the senior center has been under Human Services for many years now. The rec director position was a department head up until 3-4 years ago when the department was put under me. That position was vacant for a long time, and I think it never got fixed. I would think that the scale would come down because the position is no longer a department head. which is what we tried to do last year's budget, to say that it should be parity, right? I agree with you. It's a union issue. We're rectifying it this year. We're trying to rectify it this year. That's something that, you know, has to be negotiated with the union and HR, I suppose, to, if they want to lower the salary for that, that should be done through that mechanism.
So, yeah, so I understand, so, and I also, so I'll walk back something I just said. All right, so maybe it's unfair to characterize it as a shell game, because it's not a lack of transparency, it's really an attempt to achieve parity among leaders in your department, and I get that, and I'm good with that. But I think that this goes to a larger thing that I have talked about before, and that is that we have several Band-Aids, you know, in our budgeting process, Band-Aids and baling wire and bubble gum, where we did these things that were supposed to be temporary fixes that have been, you know, here longer than I've been here, right? And I don't mean here, I mean on this planet, okay? So, you know, and Mr. Solomon knows how I feel about this, excuse me, that we need to start fixing these things permanently so that the taxpayers know that we as the leaders have been moving forward toward having the way that we assemble this make sense. So, and it goes to the bigger issue that you mentioned under your testimony, that about the maintainers, right? And this is not really directed at you because you have no control over this. But we have several types of maintainers that do different jobs that are all similar throughout the city. And I would like to see them, you know, it doesn't matter to me what local they're in, but I would like there to be parity across the board, because depending on which department you work for and where you are and what your title is, and they're different from local to local, you know, it determines a lot of other things that impact this budget. So on this one alone, I appreciate your explanation. Now I do completely understand, and I appreciate that. But what I would like to see is that whatever negotiation has to happen so that the department head or the director of recreation and the director of AAFS and the director of the senior center are all on the same scale, so that we're not shaving percentage points off, you know, knock off 11% here and so on and so forth. So I would like to see that move forward in terms of just having this make sense. The other issue that I wanted to discuss was that you mentioned $150,000 for a car, essentially a glorified carport, right? Okay. So the key issue, we'd be hard pressed to find $150,000. You know that, we all know that, right? But the key issue is that not only is it an issue that the drivers will have a lot of difficulty cleaning off those buses, but it's the law that they have to be cleaned off. They can't go down the road with 6 inches of snow on the top. Right. I know at US Foods, they have this big rig that they drive the trucks through and scrapes the snow off the top. All right? I'm not saying that we use theirs, but what I would imagine we could get one of those for a heck of a lot less money than $150,000. But that's not in this budget, right?
Yeah. No, thank you. We'll investigate that. We have been looking at other solutions because we know the 150 is high. Thank you.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Alderman Sam Browning?
You might want to pass the microphone to the Recreation Director, because the question will be going to her. Question is as follows. We previously had testimony from Chief Jenks from the Tapville Fire Department. He wants one of the 2 basketball courts to become a parking lot. I don't believe I'm misconstruing his testimony. It was something which it may not be, is not necessarily budgeted now, but it's an issue where I believe you want to refurbish those 2. So before the decision is made, could you tell us why, hypothetically, we should keep both of those basketball courts as basketball courts versus giving one of them over to his department for parking?
Sure. First, I'd like to address something real quickly with Joe. I would like you to look at the scope of the jobs between the senior center director, the rec director, the human services coordinator position. They're completely different. So a salary difference has been there for years for a reason. The rec department services age 0, because pregnant women come in and we service them, up to seniors. And the rec department runs after, everything is after 4:30, so my job ends at 10 p.m. at night and runs Saturdays and Sundays, and I believe that is different from the directors of the other departments. Historically, the rec director had a higher salary, which has been union negotiated. Lou DePina was an amazing man, and I believe he worked 60 to 70 hours a week, and that's why the salary was higher. So as you all look at that, I think the scope needs to be considered also. Nothing against any other position, but I think the positions are different and warrant different skills. Secondly, for the...
Yeah, could I just respond just to that one, so we can tie a ribbon around?
Interrupt. So, this is really inappropriate talk. We were in progress with the union now on discussion of this, and Cheryl is a union employee, and I have issues discussing labor relations in an open session. I'll be glad to go in executive session at some point, but to go further, yeah, I got to stop it now. I didn't know that Cheryl was going to get into it more.
I was
But,
just explaining
Yep.
information.
Here's the pending question.
Yes. So for the basketball courts that have been funded by the CBGB grant, we did ask for both courts to be restructured. There's 2 courts side by side. Those are the second highest used courts in the city. That community there highly uses them, not only the neighborhood kids, but children from Aquanic and Sacred Heart School. The cracks are severe, and the restructuring needs to happen to those courts. Of course, I'm going to advocate for both courts to be repaired. That grant doesn't always come to that community, so it's a great time to do that. I have looked and heard that they want to put a parking lot there. We looked at it, and I think we could add the second court if needed behind it, so they're almost teed up. So we could do the second court by moving it further back. So I would like to still see that funded if the needs of the fire department are that strong for a parking lot.
Okay.
Alderman Burnham?
Yeah, this is a general question. Leanne brought it up, and I think it would be good to know. Are we going to be going through the same exercise, requesting 1 through 5% cuts? Has that been requested, and will it be requested?
That hasn't been discussed by anyone that I'm aware of.
Okay, good to know.
Other members? Alderwoman Stay School?
As far as the fields go, and I know NFA uses our field, do they pay anything to the city to help maintain those fields?
Yes, we still get $20,000 a year from the Norwich Free Academy. That's been the same amount for a very long period. I want to say since 1980-something. It's been the same amount. We talked about it recently. We talked about it with our head maintainer guy about doing a cost analysis of how much time they spend prepping fields for the Norwich Free Academy and how much they spend on supplies and kind of truing that value up.
So I think that would be a good exercise, because that could help you with the $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 to provide the services that we provide, and then helping to pay the cost for the fields that they use.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Other members? Other questions? I have a couple. The Working Cities Challenge that you mentioned, how much time, if your department, is that consuming at this point?
So we actually didn't get the Working Cities
I know,
Challenge grant.
but United
So-
Way provided some funding.
Right, and United Way is doing systems change, which is changing curriculum in the junior highs and working with NFA. So my department isn't doing anything with that program. That program helped NFA to connect with the manufacturing pipeline, and so we are funding, out of the CDBG dollars that we get, we are funding students from the Norwich Free Academy to go through the pipeline. So it's a great partnership, but
So
time-wise.
the Norwich Works program
Yep,
you're referring to.
exactly.
Is that how the 24 positions were funded at NFA last year?
The 24 positions at NFA?
There were 24 students
Oh, 24 students.
at NFA that were
Yeah.
participating in the
Nope,
pipeline.
we did 5.
5
We
positions.
did 5 positions, yep, yep,
Okay, well, I'll save that for the other budget discussion. Yeah, thank you.
okay.
Any further questions? That's okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you all.
Next is Public Works. We'll start on page 92. This budget is the Streets and Parks Division. As you know, that there are parks and there are recreational parks. This is the part that's passive park maintenance as opposed to the recreational parks. I know there's sometimes some confusion on that. So these individuals do not perform the recreational maintenance that is from the Recreation Department. I wanted to kind of make that clear. Other than that, I'll turn over to Pat if he has any comments.
Well, good evening. If any of you don't know me, my name is Pat McLaughlin. I'm the Acting Director of Public Works. I did not personally put this budget together, but I am quite familiar with it, and I just wanted to touch on, before we get into the one division, that we had requested 2 additional laborers in the Streets Division, but they were not in the city manager's proposed budget. The Streets Division, as he has it funded, it's level positions from the current year with 32 positions. The major change to that, to the budgetary line items for streets, was that the materials and supplies line was cut $50,000 from last year. As a result, probably of not having as great a need this current year. We don't know what the next year will bring, but this current year was fairly mild, so we didn't go through as much salt, basically, this year. We do have a lot of other material needs besides salt: asphalt products, gravel, topsoil, all of our drainage products, catch basins, piping, a lot of that. So there is a lot of other costs associated with supplies other than just the salt. The other different item there you see this year is catch basin cleaning. That got put into the Streets Division. That previously had been in the landfill account. That's, I guess, an example of better accounting, where you're showing it where it should be and not in the past where it had been for an eternity. Other than those, those are the 2 major changes. The overtime is down a little bit from what we had budgeted last year and what we had requested this year. Other than that, that department, that division is fairly level funded, other than those 2 major items. I don't really think I need to go through each and every line item to explain them, but I would answer questions.
What is the grand total of all of the budgets under the Public Works Department?
Well, that's on page 91. It lists a summary of all the different
Okay,
divisions.
so the requested would be 11,114,128.
Correct, that was what was requested.
Thank you.
Members have questions? Pro Tem Nash.
The tree care is 40,000, that's outsourced?
Yes, because we also cut trees in-house, but that's for outsourcing, mostly around utility poles and situations, trees that are like really too much for our guys to handle, or we call in professionals.
I know Johnny come lately, but has that been like a negotiated thing, or is it, that's just like, that's what it's been, so we just keep paying the same thing? Have we
Well,
looked
we
for
have
other?
we piggyback onto the Norwich Public Utility
Gotcha.
contract with Linden to provide that service.
Thank you, sir.
Other members on this particular department, streets and parks? Questions, anyone? Alderman Browning.
So if I wanted to ask a question about fleet maintenance, and is this a fleet maintenance head?
Yeah,
I
it's-
would wait till we hit that page, right? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Other questions? Alderman Filbert?
I'm just going to make a comment that I think, and it's not directed towards your department, it's directed toward the city in general. $1.5 million in fringe benefits for streets and parks. It just boggles my mind. It just, in a city this size, where the majority of the people live below the poverty level, people that are fortunate enough to have a city job should be very thankful. And
Thank you.
that's not a dig, it's a fact that is brought up to me many, many times by the constituents of this city who can barely scrape by. So, but again, it's a negotiated item, so
And that's for 32 people, too.
Yeah.
oh, it's still a hell of a lot of money.
Other questions on this section?
I have one more.
Yeah, please.
Can you explain to me the policy and procedure regarding sidewalks within the city? Why do some citizens have to pay for their own sidewalks and others are provided by the city?
The overall ruling policy is that the adjacent property owner is responsible for replacing those sidewalks in front of their property. Occasionally, if we get a grant project, which usually goes toward installing new sidewalks and not replacement sidewalks, usually, then those people are not held responsible. That's, the grant pays for it, such as the roughly 20 handicap accessible ramps that we did at various places around the city last year. Those were provided through a grant. So if we get a grant, then the people don't end up paying for those sidewalks. But other than that, that's the policy, that the adjacent property owner is responsible for that.
And is that something that is uniform across the state, or is that something that's unique to this, you mean to the city of Norwich or other nearby towns?
I think it's fairly common, not unique. It's relatively common. I don't have statistics on which cities do that, but I think it's, Mike Driscoll might know better, but I would say that's a relatively common practice.
It is a relatively common practice to assess the adjacent property owner.
If I may, also, community development block grants can cover sidewalk installations when this in this case, this council deems that that area eligible for those funds, and those dollars are used for that purpose. That was done previously in Thamesville. People were concerned about people walking in the streets going to work at Mohegan. There were no sidewalks even on either side of the road, and the city did use CBDG funds for that purpose previously. But it has to be an eligible area.
Yeah, and that was, like you said, that was new sidewalks, that wasn't
Yes.
replacement walks also.
Yes, that's true. Additional questions? Move on to the next division.
Page what?
Page 93, Engineering and Administrative Division. There is one change. We have taken the one of the civil engineers and will allocate 0.5% of their time to the road and capital road bond construction season. That'll probably be just for this year, but it was a more accurate allocation of the time spent.
I just might want to add that we did, in the proposed budget, we had requested an additional position for environmental compliance person, because to deal with both the trash and the recycling, that plays a very, that weighs a lot on our office. We get a tremendous amount of calls, and involves follow-up with looking for missing carts and calling, dealing with Willimantic Waste to get things resolved. And and also the idea was for that to help with the MS4, the municipal separate storm sewer system compliance, where we have a lot of work to do with that over these next few years. But so we had requested another position, which I feel is very well needed, but that was not funded. Other than that, basically most things other than what John pointed out remain relatively the same for most of the line items in this account, in this division.
Questions of council on this division? Yes, Alderman Philbrick.
Under utilities, your street lighting, the 290, 400, that's what we pay NPU for the street lights?
So yes, that's a change from in the uniform chart of accounts that OPM has suggested. Most municipalities classify street lighting and group it with public works. Before, street lighting had been in the miscellaneous budget further back in the budget, but this is just grouping it together with public works to be more comparable to other towns. But yes, the cost of street lighting went down quite a bit this year because of the LED project.
Right, but I'm looking and seeing, yeah, so that's where the savings came from.
Yes.
Thank you.
Additional questions on this division? Okay, so we can move to the next, fleet maintenance.
Okay, the fleet maintenance division, that division basically is pretty much level.
You must have pushed it back.
Yeah, the fleet maintenance division is pretty much level funded, maintaining the same number of people and relative to and the materials and supplies. That's, like was mentioned earlier, we provide, auto parts for every different department, vehicles in the fleet, and maintain all the fleets, the whole entire fleet through this account. Yeah, there was a question.
Alderman Browning.
Yes, I have a question. Probably it's best to call up your,
With me is John Raines. John Raines
Hi, we've met once before when Ryan Thompson was showing me the MRAP. How much would you anticipate, if anything, that's going to cost the city of Norwich to maintain?
I haven't really given any thought. When it arrived, I was told not to pay much mind, and until I was told differently. So we haven't really approached it and looked at it, and have done the inspections to it. There's more sat at fleet maintenance.
So,
Uninspected, unchecked, so we really don't have an answer for you for that.
okay, and my understanding from Pat was he was having someone come down from Windsor to maintain it, or to at least work on it. I don't know if you're aware of that, or working with the person, or...
I've been pretty much out in the field on that. I haven't been kept in the loop on that in this bit. I was originally asked about it from the police department and my input on it, and wasn't what they wanted to hear, so I kind of left out.
Yeah, so this money in here is not budgeted for maintaining that vehicle?
There is no money in there to maintain that vehicle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pro Tem Nash.
While you're here, I'll hit you up to, fleet maintenance is probably one of the 3 places I spend most of my time as a councilman, whether it's City Hall, Police Department, or down at fleet maintenance. And I notice your overtime budget is proposed and requested for $45,000. And I know, watching the guys work down there and the amount of work that they have, how much of that overtime is just those guys catching up? Or would a mechanic's assistant better aid you and lower down the overtime with another mechanic's assistant at 43 and change versus the 45 and overtime?
Well, one way or the other, but the overtime, there is no overtime spent on general maintenance of the vehicles of any of the fleet. The overtime that we spend is either snow or after-hour breakdown repairs. We don't do any overtime on general maintenance.
So an additional mechanic's assistant would not be called for? Would not be called for? You don't need one?
We do need one. We're operating with 5 mechanics, a lead, maintaining 350 pieces of equipment.
That's what I was trying to get at.
I've
Okay.
requested somebody for years and have not
Thank you, sir.
seen it, so.
Alderwoman Philbrick.
Alderman Nash brought up a good point, and other people are more diplomatic than I am, but I'm not about to change my stripes. Here's a department, here's a city that we increase our mechanical equipment, in my opinion, far beyond the limits of what we can afford or what we need. And yet, you have a department here whose responsibility is to maintain all this equipment, but we don't give them enough people to maintain it. How do you expect 7 people to do all the work of, how many vehicles are there in the city of Norwich? How many pieces of equipment are there? Hundreds, hundreds. If you take every lawnmower and every lawn spreader and every snow plow and every police cruiser and every fire engine and every plow truck, never mind the emergencies, how do they get their daily work done? So, and having said that, and I know that I'll probably get a slap on the wrist for this, but I have to say it. So you have a fleet maintenance superintendent who is responsible for every single piece of equipment in the city of Norwich, who makes $82,950, and yet we have a recreational supervisor who comes in here and asks for $89,000. I don't get it. I don't get it, and I don't like it. And I know we have unions, and I can see the looks on some of your faces, but I don't really care, because I'm a taxpayer, and people elected me to represent them, and I get phone calls every single day asking me, why?
I'm not going to get into the recreation supervisor, but there's a complex history of job descriptions, like expenditures, comparable pay. I mean, don't smile like that. I'm trying to give you an answer.
No, I know.
You know, and there's parity within the contracts. If you raise one salary, you piggyback on other salaries. As far as what they do, they could use more people. A lot of departments could use more people. You yourself and the rest of the council are wanting us to keep the tax rate down. Well, you can't do it for free. Something happens when you cut back on personnel, which means some things suffer, some things don't get done, and some things take more time. There's no free lunch when you have to cut back, especially at this point when we've cut back historically long before I've been here. So I'd be glad to add people to the budget if the council decides that that's what they want, but that's not the direction that and the trend that I've
Absolutely.
anticipated.
It's just, as I said, it's something that weighs heavy on my mind, and it's something that is brought up to me everywhere I go.
Thank you. Alderman Browning?
I just have a quick comment, and this is a flatline budget, and I understand it. I will say that at some point, the police department may come to you, the city manager, and say, we want more money to work on that MRAP, and it needs to come out of fleet maintenance. I can tell you that based on what I've heard from Ryan Thompson, what I've heard from this gentleman, they weren't given enough information about this vehicle to budget it in. It's not a vehicle which is within their wheelhouse to maintain. It's an armored vehicle that weighs about 40,000 pounds. It's not a police cruiser. If they come in, if the police department comes in and tells you, we want Public Works to pay for maintaining that armored vehicle, I would ask you to turn back to the police department and say, you have $50,000 in your asset forfeiture fund, and please fund it out of that account. And I'm trying to be reasonable here. I know that, why you flatline them, because we have, all kinds of needs in the city. I'm just simply saying that I don't want to wake up one morning and see that $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 got shifted, John, from, the police department needs over to Public Works Department on a vehicle which we sat and we had a meeting with Pat, and I still have qualms about us owning.
Thank you. Are there further questions? Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you. This question is really for Mr. Raymond. Mr. Raymond, last year, and I had it open to the page, and now I can't find it. Did we reduce your staff by one last year? No. We kept you the same, right? Okay. So from last year to this year, is your staffing sufficient to do the job, for lack of a better word, or phrase, I should say?
It's sufficient to do what we have to do. We're not able to do anything over. In years past, we did more body work, more prettying up the fleet, doing rust repair. But in the last few years, we haven't been able to accomplish that because of workload. So we kind of scaled that back. So we can maintain the fleet and maintain this to a certain level. Can we maintain it to a higher level? Yes, we can, but we can maintain it, and we have been. We try to keep a safe fleet. We don't really allow things to go on the road. I shouldn't say we don't really, we do not allow vehicles that are unsafe, and we do not repair things to a margin. We do repair them. At least we'd like to think we repair them to a much higher degree than just a marginal. Just get it done.
And does your department maintain like the lawn mowing equipment and items like that. The rec department has a bunch of equipment, that they use to mow grass and, tractors and things like that. Are you responsible for those as well?
Yes, we take care of, I believe it's 13 different departments, 13 different departments, vehicles for the city of Norwich. I believe that's the correct number. But we take care of everything from weed whackers to payloads. Everything. Fire apparatus, anything, basically anything the city has, we will take care of that.
Does that include the equipment that the Golf Course Authority owns?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Pro Tem Nash.
To piggyback off of Alderman DeLucia, first I want to say, John, the budget's terrific. There's a little tweaking that needs to be done other than that, but I'm totally stoked about what you've done and where we can go with that. So first I want to say thank you. Mr. Raymond, how much of the stuff that you say go beyond and above that we can't do anymore, how much of that is outsourced to dealerships, mechanics, other organizations outside of the city's umbrella?
The only item that we
Microphone.
currently outsource, we used to do a lot of the collision repair in-house. If it was a minor collision, didn't require any kind of fancy equipment as far as pulling and stuff like that. So basically, the only thing that we farm out at this point is accident damage. Basically, accident damage.
Are we painting vehicles anymore?
No, no.
So that's outsourced?
That's not even, we're not doing it.
Okay.
We're not doing it. What we ended up doing years back is going more to a stainless steel body this is more particular on the plow trucks, that's what we see the majority of the road. We're doing more stainless steel bodies, phasing out the steel, so that changes our realm of what we're doing.
Thank you, sir. I didn't mean to throw you in the middle there like that. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Page 95, refuse and recycling.
As you can see, this is one line item. It's refuse services. That's for collection and disposal.
I'm sorry. Alderman Burnham?
Just a quick question. In the reports that we get, is the solid waste line item the same thing as refuse and recycling here? Yeah, okay.
I mean, you can see a breakdown of some of those costs. I know up in the top, it's just listed as one line item, but down in the lower part, you can see a breakdown of where that comes from.
Yeah, there just wasn't a one-to-one ratio in the reports that we get, just making sure it's the same thing.
Yeah, there's a slight increase in this account. Based on, we've been taking in more solid waste. The refuse stream is a little higher than it has been in the past, which is when the economy is a little better, starts to come back, there's usually more trash generated.
Yes, Alderman DeLucia.
Did our service provider agree to this proposed dollar amount?
Yeah, we have a 10-year contract on the refuse pickup, and there's a certain increase associated each year, but, we have a long-term contract for the pickup, and the disposal costs could fluctuate, but we don't anticipate that.
So, and this is not a loaded question, so why the difference between the request and the proposed? If we have a contract and we know what the dollar amount is?
Well, because I had actually, after the previous director left, I pointed out the fact that we needed a little more money in this account based on those contractual adjustments for the coming year than what was originally proposed by the previous director.
So the last column, the proposed, at 2.694 and change, is the verified number, I guess? You're saying that you amended this?
There's two things going on there. There's
Thank you.
the catch basin cleaning of 75,000 is moved under to Public Works Streets and Parks, and the SCARA contract, that's the $58 per ton that we pay for disposal of the refuse that gets picked up. And Pat was looking at the trends and said that we need to bump that up based on the way the trends are looking.
Okay, so, all right, thank you. I think that clarifies it for me, because, so all of these things in the list at the bottom of page 95 are not done by our service providers. Some are done by us, by your department.
By different service providers. I mean, SCARA is the trash
Yep,
disposal cost, and the catch basin cleaning is a different contractor. So there are different contracts involved with those various items in the bottom.
okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Alderman Philbrick?
How many years are left on the contract with Willimantic Waste?
I believe we are in the third year. We finished we're in the fourth year, so we have 6 years left after starting July 1.
Okay. And the bagged leaf collection is not done by the city? That's subcontracted out?
That has, yes, that's a separate, we do some of it ourselves in-house, but we also contract the majority of it out. We were looking at this year possibly doing more of it in-house, going to the paper bags and not, in the past we've allowed the plastic trash bags and you have to dump those out, and it's very labor intensive to do that. And guys were getting injured, that's why we started contracting more of that out. But actually for this coming year, we're looking at going to just a bagged collection. Paper bag.
Paper bag.
Other questions? One of the other increases in bulky waste is that we've had these free bulky waste events on weekends, and we've increased the number of them in the last year. And they were very successful. Lines out the yard, out down the street, people were taking advantage of it. And part of that was we're trying to have less blight in our communities, our neighborhoods, our streets, and that's one way of getting people incentivized to go there themselves. But that's part of the increase in the bulky waste side, too. Any further questions? Public Works? '96.
Building maintenance account.
Yes, that's the final budget. This is for the building maintenance, including custodians and supervisory personnel to maintain the various buildings that we have.
And that's relatively flat funded. It's down just slightly. It's maintaining the number of people that we have in that division.
There are questions of members of council on this last division? Yes, Alderman Philbrick.
Your department cleans the library?
Yes.
Is there a charge involved with that? Do they pay you to, or is there some sort of
No.
in-kind?
No, it's in kind. They don't pay for it.
I'm sorry,
They don't, it's an in-kind service from the city to the Otis Library. They don't pay for
does
that.
in-kind mean that you get something in return? In-kind?
No.
Doesn't? Oh, I always thought that's what that meant.
We do get revenue for cleaning NPU's building, though. We clean that building also.
Oh, so NPU pays, but the library doesn't.
Any further questions? Thank you very much. 2 minutes? Okay. John, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Yes, yes.
7:30.
Yep. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions?
My chocolate, I'm sure.
Good evening. You guys all set up?
He wants a cough drop.
I have a Snickers on the Go big or go home, right?
Put them both out there.
Yep.
Sounds like a cat that has a hairball. You ever hear a cat like they do when they gag it with their hair?
Yep, I had a cat, I know.
I don't think it's gonna hear. You got extra handouts? Maybe just use the handouts.
I do have handouts, absolutely.
Maybe just go to Plan B then.
Where's Leon?
Where's Leon when you need him, right?
Where's Leon?
It can only be one place at a time.
Oh, well, it should
Perhaps
be in here.
NPU could help us with that.
I know, NPU, maybe they
Why
could
aren't
lend
you-
us,
Perhaps you would
There it
share
is, it's coming.
resources.
It's warming up.
Just in case
It's
Thank you.
warming
you
up.
have any other technical challenges.
thank you.
I know,
As a backup.
I know.
Thank you.
It's got to reset.
There we go. All right. Do you need the mouse pad? You scroll down.
Seems to be working all right up here.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, am I limited to 3 minutes here tonight?
What was your name?
All right, 16 South Golden Street. Now, everybody here ready to go? All right, I'll thank you, first of all, for providing us the opportunity to provide the Norwich Public Utilities budget this evening. Let me start off by saying I'm proud of the efforts of the 40 people who provided input into this budget and of the 146 employees who work every day to provide Norwich safe and reliable utility service. Over the last few months, we have provided the board 5 strategic presentations that reviewed the input for the over 1,400 accounts that we budget to. So it's a very complicated budget. All right. The highlights of this year's budget are, and this is the big one, we're proposing a budget with no rate increases in any of our utility services. In addition,
We'll hold you to that. It's on camera. Oh, no,
It's
it's
on
not
camera.
on
It
camera.
is. It's right there.
in addition, we've been able to increase our revenues by $2.2 million, driven largely by economic development, gas growth, other things, but mostly economic development. And we have been able to provide $8.8 million to the city general fund, an increase of $385,000 over the last year. In building our budget this year, we considered making sure we are proactively addressing our aging infrastructure in a responsible manner, meeting or exceeding our constantly changing regulatory requirements, exceeding our customer expectations for service and reliability, continuing to promote economic development in Norwich, and deploying technology for the continued benefit of Norwich and the city. The $8.5 million we contribute to the city general fund helps to lower the taxpayer burden by over 4.5 mils. It results in a $735,000 payment a month to the city and has resulted in a payment of over $81 million over the past 10 years. This is the 4th consecutive year we have contributed over $8 million. I will now turn it over to Laura Heron, our financial planning manager, to present the detailed revenue projections.
The next 4 slides go through each of our divisions individually for the revenue projections for fiscal year 20 budget. In the gas division, we are budgeting revenues at $22.4 million for fiscal year 20. The budget is based on our weather normalized sales, and it includes a projected sales volume increase of just under 3%. Additional revenues in the gas division of $724,000 include sources such as energy efficiency, penalties, our CNG station sales, gas and city services, and other miscellaneous revenues, other contracts that we have that are worked through our gas division. In the electric division, we have budgeted just under $58 million for fiscal year 20. Again, the budget is based on weather normalized sales, and our projected sales volume is going to increase just shy of 1%. Other operational revenues within the electric division are $3.8 million, and this includes the jet turbine, penalties, additional revenues from energy efficiency, and miscellaneous revenues, including items such as the cable TV attachments and the dispatching fees that we receive from ISO for our control room work. In the water division, we're budgeting $11.5 million of revenues. The budget is based on historical averages and trends, and it includes modest growth for fiscal year 20.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
It includes modest growth for fiscal year 20. As you can see, there's not a significant change, about $200,000 year over year for the budgeted revenues. And other operational revenues in the water division include about $337,000, and that's items such as cell tower releases, bulk water sales, and miscellaneous items like private hydrants and field service calls. In the sewer division, we have budgeted $9 million in revenues for fiscal year 20. This is based on historical averages and trends. It does include some modest growth, about a 2% increase in sewer volumes, and other operational revenues within the sewer division, about $100,000. And that includes penalties, fees for septic receiving at our wastewater plant, and some miscellaneous service contracts. Chris?
NPU also provides additional value to the city ratepayers and the taxpayers. Our customers receive over $1.1 million in energy assistance programs that we do help facilitate. We have provided over $800,000 in efficiency rebates to both residential and commercial customers. And our natural gas expansion efforts have provided additional property taxes of over $385,000 from our 2 new gate stations and $3 million in revenue that result in $300,000 annually to the city from the growth. Our hydros reduce our purchase power by over $514,000 a year and provide sustainable energy to power over 880 homes in our community. The LED streetlights have been a huge success. They save the city over $350,000 per year going forward. We partner with NCDC to promote economic development and fund $150,000 of their budget. Also, through the Neighborhood Assistance Act, we are able to provide tax credits of $150,000 to local Norwich nonprofit organizations. Last year, we were able to provide assistance to the ARC and to UCFS. This has been a very high-level overview of our budget. We will continue to discuss the budget with our commissioners over the next few weeks, and we are working towards a vote at our next meeting on April 16th. Does the council have any questions?
Members, questions? Alderwoman Gould.
2 questions. Are you still offering new gas service to residential customers?
Yes, we are. The expansion projects that we have embarked upon have added significant ability for us to purchase more gas on the pipeline, and the 2 gate station upgrades that allowed this to happen occurred at Oakland Heights and over on across from Walmart at our Salem station as well. So we are able to provide as much natural gas to the community as the community needs.
So will you be opening up neighborhoods again? So if somebody moves to X street that may have gas, but they weren't there, you can call up and say, oh, I want to tap into that gas line? Or are you offering it in, these 5 streets for this year and these 5 streets for next year? How does that work?
So right now, we have an expansion plan to the Hale Mill and the Yannick Village. We'll pick up any customers along the way, and if there's interest in the village that makes sense from a reasonable payback period, the 20-year payment of the bond, we'll expand to that area. So that's what we're marketing this year for our gas expansion. Anyone along an existing main, and there are quite a few homes that are not connected in along existing mains, we also connect in, and that's always free of charge. So if there's a extension that goes to a neighborhood that doesn't quite pay back, there's an opportunity also to pay that differential to make it work.
Okay. And my second question, hooking up to city sewer, are we doing, is that being offered to any of the residential customers?
So once again, there are also customers along existing sewers that have not connected in, and there's a connection fee of $2,500 per EDU, and anyone along an existing sewer can connect in. We have been asked to look at several other neighborhoods this year, and we're looking for interest there. We probably have some public meetings to see if there is interest. But in the city of Norwich, it's a new sewer project. If we build a new sewer project, everyone along that route gets assessed. Whether you just replaced your system last year with an engineered system, or you have lived there 30 years and you need a system. So it's very controversial, and we need to make sure that we have the majority of the neighborhood who wants to tie in. And if that's the case, we'll be coming to the city council for review and approval.
Okay, and just one comment. Not increasing any of the rates across the 4 utilities is just absolutely huge. I'm not saying that it's going to happen next year, but, thank you for going back to the commissioners and to NPU staff and saying, you know what, we're going to hold them flat this year. I think that's absolutely tremendous. So thank you for all that work.
Other members? Alderwoman Philbrick.
As always, I appreciate all that NPU does. I think you're a well-oiled machine. I do, as always, have questions and concerns about several things. The money that comes into NPU, is your only revenue source or the ratepayers?
It's the vast majority. We do have some other income sources. We rent space on our water towers, so for cell phones and radios. So that's a small amount of revenue that we get. For providing gas appliance services, and if you have a problem with your boiler or hot water heater, we come out, we charge for that. Another source of revenue. We do a lot of city services for the Board of Ed and other departments as far as their HVAC work as well. So we do receive revenue from there. At CMEC, we dispatch their generational assets. We get covered actually a equivalent of a control room operator by CMEC for that. So there are a number of different revenue sources, but we are talking 98% or more of our revenue is derived from the ratepayers.
Okay, and please don't take this the wrong way, but it always comes to my mind. I'm looking at your additional NPU economic impact, 1.1 million in energy assistance programs. That money is coming from the ratepayers.
No, it's not.
Okay.
What we do is we fund to have a TVCCA representative in our office to help people get energy assistance. And this is coming from Operation Fuel and other charitable organizations. So that 1.1 million is for over 1,200 customers who are needy and need additional assistance. We facilitate them getting extra help to pay their bill. We also have a matching payment program. So if somebody who is very needy and they haven't been able to pay their bill, if they will pay some of their bill, we'll match what they can pay to try to get somebody who needs a leg up to be able to pay their bill and become paying customers in the long run.
Okay, but then where does that money come from?
That does come from us. It's a small portion of the bill.
Comes from you or comes from
From ratepayers.
us?
There really isn't much you. It's ratepayers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my other, and I know this is a double-edged sword, and it sticks in my craw with it when you say, let me get the millions of dollars that you give to the city of Norwich.
Yes. Yeah. The payment to the city, our pilot payment in lieu of taxes.
I would like for someone to come up with a better terminology, because you're not giving that money to, we have already paid that money. You're taking it out of my right-hand pocket, but the other side of that is, if you didn't, you could probably lower the rates,
we could lower rates accordingly.
but the taxes would go up, probably.
Yes, exactly.
All right. And then my last question.
But there are the larger customers are paying a good piece of that $8.5 million. It's so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we know that some of them didn't pay any and kind of just walked away.
That happens with all our customers, and we try to work well to protect all the ratepayers from those instances.
And my last question and concern is the sewer treatment plant.
Yes.
My goal is that when this comes on board, when this gets in the pipeline and comes down the road, that this will be considered a shared service of the city of Norwich, because there is no way in God's green earth that the number of sewer customers could financially support a sewer treatment plant facility. It couldn't happen. Do you have any projections? How many sewer customers are there? Just
A little over 9,000, between 9 and 10,000.
really, that many?
Yeah.
Okay. And what is the projected cost today of the sewer treatment plant?
So we are north of $100 million, probably in $120 million. The first project that we'll be able to do on the sewer plant upgrade is in 2023, just based on the plans we provided to the Department of Environmental Protection. That has been, they've been working on our plans, have not given us any feedback on those plans since August. So that 2023 is already 2023 and 3/4. I don't, they're not moving fast to move our projects forward. So we have some time to plan this out, and I hope to work closely with the city and the council to come up with the best solution, and neighboring communities, the best solution for paying for that plant.
It's going to be a huge, do you have any money set aside for this?
The mandatory upgrades charge, which is part of your
Yep.
bill, is putting together a sinking fund, and that's going to cover at least the start of the project for when we to cover the debt service. Right now, because we're a distressed community, and and because of the EPA requirements as such, we may be able to stretch the payments instead of the normal 20 years to 30 years or more. We're working with Department of Energy and Protection to make that happen.
And as I have said always, I have never had, with the exception of my bill, a bad experience with NPU. You call, the people are friendly, they're knowledgeable. If there's an issue, they're there. When your people come to help with if your furnace light goes out, the people are literally clean, well-dressed, well-mannered, and it's a pleasure doing business with you. You run a good ship over there.
Thank you.
Just the bill that every once in a while gets me.
I'll trade mine.
No, that's all right. That's no.
Any month.
No, that's quite all right.
Alderman Nash?
So a quick comment, Mr. LaRose. First, I want to say I'm excited that there's no rate increases and you're projecting additional revenues over that, even though we're not raising the rates, you're still looking at an increased rate revenues. So I'm really excited about that. And I hope that we'll exceed those revenues and not be able to, not have to raise rates next year. So if I'm sitting here, I'm going to ask and make sure that we're on target and hopefully use those revenues to offset the rate increases. So, but thank you very much for the budget. It's very informative. I do have questions, but I'll call you on some of the things I want to talk about.
Anytime.
I
Always
also
available.
want to reiterate what Alderwoman Philbrick said. Every time I've ever called over there, your staff is polite, respectful, and very, very helpful. And you don't get that much in customer service these days where you call and get a person that's pleasant and helpful. And so I want to make sure you please pass that on to all your employees.
Yeah, not only can you call and get a live person, you can also come down to our office, which you can't
Terrific.
necessarily do that with other utilities. So we're happy to help any customer on the phone and live.
Other members? Alderman DeLucia.
Good evening, Mr. LaRose. Thank you for all of you for being here. I concur with my colleagues that it is a good thing that the city owns its own utility. I just have a couple of questions. I'm looking at page 130 of our budget booklet, and this is just more of a curiosity than anything, because it is the Board of Commissioners' purview on the line items. But I noticed that you're increasing the dollar amount for vehicles and transportation equipment by $500,000.
Yes.
And I just wondered what's prompted that.
So we have a $100 vehicle fleet. And this year, there are 3 vehicles we're replacing. We're replacing an excavator that we use to install gas and water mains and sewer mains. We're replacing the underground construction truck, which is what that crew uses, which has compressors, which has generators and alternators. And we're also replacing a bucket truck. All these vehicles have met the end of their useful life. They have more hours idling than they actually do mileage, but they're all high mileage and more than 15 years old. So when you have a fleet of 100 vehicles, you have to be replacing at least a few vehicles every year.
Okay. The NCDC allocation that you're providing for $150,000, and this is, again, a curiosity just because I want to have my facts straight. Is the staff, the paid staff at NCDC also on your health insurance plan at the utility?
Yes, they are. That does not include in that.
And that's not included in the 150?
No.
Okay.
And that's something we're going to work closely with NCDC to to get that more transparent going forward.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, so this is a conversation that we've had several times regarding the payment to the city. All right, so last year, $8.48 million was paid to the city. The allocation to the rate stabilization account, according to your financials, was about 8.3 million, so pretty close to the same amount of money. And the rate stabilization money balance went up to about $35 million or a little bit more. So the part of this, as I understood it from the newspaper, that's why I'm starting with this question. I want to make sure that the information I read was correct. About $4 million or so was used out of rate stabilization fund in order to facilitate the zero rate increase for this year?
The amount of money we're using from the rate stabilization fund is $4 million and consistent with what we used last year as well. We are going to be doing a detailed cost of service study this summer and looking at rates across all our classes. And in that time period, we'll decide if we need to adjust that. So there may be some increase in the purchase power adjustment, or to offset that, we'll have those analyses done by the early fall. And we'll have that ready for next year's budget.
So what was projected to be, or what accumulated up to about $35 million in rate stabilization would now be $31 million, because you're essentially pulling $4 million out of the bank, so to speak.
Correct.
To hold rates the same.
Yeah, so the electric rates are mainly based on natural gas pricing. And our rates going forward, which we get from CMEC, are based on those natural gas projections, futures into next year. There's a lot of unknowns, and we also have more of our capacity coming online, which we'll get more benefit from. So, our budget is our best guess going forward. We adjust if revenues are less, or we can always reduce our spending to compensate for that. But we're going to be doing, once again, a detailed cost of service analysis, and we'll see where we stand going into next year's budget season.
And because I certainly don't have nearly the level of expertise as Bloom Shapiro or Mr. Pothier. So this was the report at the end of the fiscal year. So this told you finally what the final numbers are, because right now the numbers are really just a projection all the way out through the entire fiscal year, correct?
Yeah, so the payment to the city is always based on the previous year's audited financials. So we're projecting what it's going to be at the end of next year. If commodity prices increase, that's going to be more payment to the city. If commodity prices decrease, it'll be less.
Right.
The consumer wins if it's less, even though it could be a little less payment to the city.
So what do you predict in your budget that the deposit into the rate stabilization fund will be for this fiscal year? So you're predicting that you're going to pay the city $8.86 million. I'm sure you made predictions for all of those
From the rate
numbers.
stabilization, we're removing $4 million to maintain our steady rates. Are you talking about payment to the city next year?
No. So
So the rate stabilization fund, I need to double check that number, because I don't know that 35 million, I'm not positive on that number, because the last time I looked at the CMEC balances, I believe that the rate stabilization fund alone had closer to 8 to 9 million in it. So let me make sure of that.
Okay.
And the dollars go in and out of the rate stabilization fund, and we anticipate using a considerable amount of them between this year and next year. So let me confirm that 35 million for you and the projections for next year, because a lot of those dollars flow in and out through CMEC, they don't flow in and out through our books. So let me make sure I get an accurate number for you.
right. So let me, and like I said earlier, I'll tie a ribbon around this. So because I'm looking at this from I'm trying to simplify it for my own benefit, right? So if last year $8-point-something million went into rate stabilization fund, that's sitting there with other monies, I believe I read 35, but whatever the number is, right? So now at the beginning of this fiscal year, you will take 4.4 or 4 point whatever million dollars out and set the rates for the year?
No,
How does that work?
it comes out monthly,
Like, so as you need it, so to
as we need it, yes.
Okay, all right. Because what I'm getting at is this, and I know that you are all aware of my position on this. I believe that if the payment to the city was not included in your rate calculations, it reduces the need for the amount of money that you put into rate stabilization, I think, in my simplified view, and it allows you to drop rates. And I'm thinking that as a benefit from the standpoint of how much more business could we draw into the city, or developers could we draw into the city if our utility rates dropped by the amount of the impact of not having the payment that you make to the city included in your rate calculation?
So right now, if I were to provide a detailed rate analysis in comparison of all four, that's a half-hour to an hour presentation on its own.
And I would probably be lost, right?
Yeah,
'Cause you're
but
the
right now,
expert.
we're 14% less
Right.
than the surrounding communities of an IOU that is in the area. So we are competitive at a retail level with that, or better than.
Yeah.
So not to say that if we didn't have that pilot, that payment to the city, we couldn't be even lower. We're the highest payment to the city in the state of Connecticut, and we're double what the national average is of a public power community. The closest, Groton, is 7.5%. Many are in the 1% or less of the other municipals in the city, in the state.
Well, and I'm not, I wouldn't debate with you. In fact, I completely agree with you that our rates are competitive, okay? And that if you didn't have to pay the city the $8+ million, that your rates could be a lot lower. I agree with both of those statements, okay? But I also believe that if the utility isn't going to make that payment to the city, then why should the city own its own utility? Right? And so, again, my simplified view is that the payment to the city should not be passed on to the ratepayers. One, for the benefit of the ratepayers, and two, for the benefit of encouraging economic development, because it would be so darn cheap to buy. We would be cheaper than anybody else on the planet.
In our $100 million revenue budget, we don't have $8 million of other revenue that we could pay that money to the city with. It has to come from the ratepayers.
But if you're putting almost the same amount of money into rate stabilization, I would argue that you do.
But we're not putting all that money in there, and that money is specifically for the electric division, specifically for stabilizing rates. It's earmarked, it's designated. I know I'm using a bunch of accounting terms, but.
No, I understand those
That money
terms.
has that purpose, and because of that, it's not flexible. It's not like a general fund account.
You're saying it's restricted?
It's
It is
restricted,
restricted.
yes. And
By what?
it all flows through CMEX, so it all is under CMEX review, those types of things. Now, I could tell them today, I want to take everything out of that account and give me that money, but that money is for the electric division. It would be the same thing as trying to go into the bank account that belongs to the sewer division and use that to buy something for the gas division. I can't do
You
that.
can't commingle
Each
it.
of those, even though I might have one bank account, and it's a fairly good size at $100 million a year of an organization, every single one of those dollars belongs to each division. Each division, it belongs to a specific purpose, whether it's to purchase gas, to purchase power, to fund operations, to fund capital. All of those dollars are earmarked. And the only place for me to get the dollars, the almost $9 million that we contribute to the city, I know we need to come up with a good name for that, but the only way to do that is to collect that as part of the rate. There is no other money coming into NPU to pay the city. Over $95 million that we receive out of $100 million comes from rates.
Yeah, we deplete the fund, how do we pay it the next year?
Well, again,
Sometimes money's going into
basing
the
this
fund,
point on.
sometimes money's coming out of the fund.
Right.
It's fluid.
But
It's
I'm
fluid, and we
also
try to
basing-
maintain a reasonable balance with reasonable rates over the long term. We're looking at long-term rate stability. That fund allows us to do it. If we have an extremely hot July, we don't want to raise the rates in July, and then we have a nice cool August, we can lower the rates in August. We could change rates monthly if we didn't have some way or some fund to allow us to stabilize those rates.
Okay, and in fairness, I am basing this on the fact that what I believe I read in here was that there are tens of millions of dollars in rate stabilization.
I will confirm that.
Okay?
And
And
also
at
confirm how that's funded, so we can make sure that we're clear on that.
And I appreciate your patience, Mr. Staley. And I'm also looking at the fact that, I have $93.7 million in expenses and $101.2 million in total revenue. So, that's a pretty good chunk of change right there in terms of gross
Yeah.
profit.
And, well, call it profit or
Oh,
no, we are,
How about gross difference?
So that gross difference, I account for all of those dollars, and some of those dollars are earmarked for future things, like the $100 million sewer plant. So there's a good chunk of money sitting in there. Over the past, probably more than 10 years when the mandatory upgrades charge, we've accumulated close to $5 million in that fund, one of those dollars at a time. We also have dollars within all of the other divisions. Within the water division specifically, we have a significant amount of money that we have to hold aside because of state statute and bond covenant requirements for our debt reserve. We have to have 1 year's worth of debt reserve payments at $20 million worth of capital projects divided by 20 years. That's a lot of money to hold aside, but we have to do that. We are required to have those dollars. Now, those dollars are also in interest-bearing accounts, so we're making some money on those dollars, doing the best we can and working with the city treasurer's office to make sure we're managing that. But there are things that we have to have on hand in order to leverage that low-interest loan so that we can replace that very, very old infrastructure. It all works together, and we're doing our level best to find a way to make it work together for the health of NTU and the benefit of our customers.
And just one other thing, we have an emergency reserve fund as well that money goes into. And the purpose of that is to protect the residents of Norwich. If there's a terrible storm here or some other circumstance like that, like Puerto Rico or the peninsula or Houston, things like that, where we might not have any revenue for an extended period of time because everybody would be on their back, and they wouldn't be getting any service, where we would have to pay overtime, tremendous overtime, to our own employees, and where we'd have to call on mutual aid from other communities in order to help us get back on our feet. So it's important for us to have a reserve in order to do that. I mean, not to overly dramatize this, if we didn't have the ability to do that, people could literally die. I mean, they could be without power or without heat for extended periods of time. So we have a reserve fund like that. Both Moody's and S&P looks at that reserve fund as part of our bond rating. And they always say they want a little bit more, but they tell us what we ought to have, and we listen to their advice. So, I mean, there are many other things that aren't expended in the same budget year that...
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have a follow-up question.
Go right ahead.
Just clarify for me, please, $150,000 to NCDC. And what I wrote down here was the staff insurance is paid by NPU, but I'm sure I wrote that down wrong. They participate in your insurance plan, but they pay their own premiums.
Yes, they pay their contributions based on what their election is. They pay their cost share. So they're not on our payroll, but they pay it as if they would be paying a payroll deduction type of contribution.
Do they pay the same payroll deduction as your regular employees?
I believe so.
What's the percentage?
What's that? That's a pretty good deal, and I was not aware of that, and you learn something new every day, and I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
Well, what is it? What's the question?
It would be 90%, the premium is 90% shared by NPU, 10% by the employee or the NCDC employee for the health insurance and for the dependents. And then also on the dental insurance, 90% is covered for the employee only, and they would pay the full rate for any of their dependents.
Who negotiated that deal?
That's been there for a long time.
That goes to the old statement, Mr. Staley, that's the way we've always done it in Norwich. And you know what, sometimes, so you're telling me, just so I'm clear on this, that if I was an employee of NCDC and I had health insurance, and I elected to, well, so I'm going to pay, and my premium, the premium is $100 a month. This is all hypothetical.
Sure.
I, as the employee, am going to pay $10, and NPU is going to pay $90.
Yes.
Oh, you lost me on that one, ladies and gentlemen. That's my money. It's coming out of ratepayer money. I don't think the public knows that, and I don't think the public would be happy to learn that. And I am shocked that in all the years that I have sat here and questioned, and I'm not talking about you specifically because I learn something new every day, but that is right up there.
Other questions?
Well, first of all, it does come out of the ratepayers' payments, there's no question about that. But I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but the insurance cost for the NCDC employees relative to a $100 million budget, it's not costing you anything to speak of. And the question is, do you want to have an economic development agency or not? Now, I mean, that could be done different ways. It could be internalized into the city, and then the city would pay the cost. But we're just trying to help NCDC.
No, I understand.
Which is how the city is elected to pursue its economic development. If there's another direction, that's fine too.
I have my own very personal opinions about NCDC, so I will say those for another day.
Other questions? Just a couple quick ones. The water treatment plant upgrade. We hear bits and pieces of it. I think it would be beneficial for everyone sitting this side of the desk to have, call it a workshop or a discussion on that where we could get into greater detail what we're facing. And I think the public would benefit from that as well. The last time we submitted plans, I recall they changed the regulations again during the process of submission, which made us go back and re-engineer the whole damn thing again.
Yeah. So
And that's part of the roadblocks we're facing. The people in Hartford and at the EPA can't leave anything alone very long. They change the standard, it changes the outcome, and your design that was accepted 2 years ago is now outdated, unacceptable, and you have to go all the way back to the drawing board again and go through another delay. But I think we could all benefit by having a discussion in greater detail on that. I mean, the hour is getting late. I don't want to do that tonight. But I think that would help everyone.
Yeah, so we have two major initiatives going on. The combined sewer overflow issue, which is going to be over the next 20 years. And the first project's going to be on the east side starting next year. We're in the design phases now. The sewer plant, as you said, we had completed our design almost 3 years ago now, and they changed all the flood elevations to the 500-year flood. They have since relaxed those, but not to the original design. So some things still need to be tweaked, and they are not even approving our combined sewer overflow plan. Never mind, they said they won't even touch the plant until after that is well completed. So the earliest in our plan is 2023 for the next upgrade, but I think we can have a comprehensive workshop to cover both projects, and always would like any input as to how we proceed and any help in maybe getting Hartford to move a little quicker in some of the issues that we would like to have moved a little quicker.
I think it would be beneficial if we invited some of those people from Hartford down here. I was in a meeting last month with DEEP, OPM, and DECD, and they were balking at combined sewer outfall upgrades that go through floodways, which,
They all do.
but they have to.
Yeah, that's
Well,
where you
here in
have
Norwich,
to.
they do.
It's,
You-
they're
as
ignoring
you
their own
as a
reality
floodway, yeah.
and all the pressure they put on us. This was specifically with Shipping Street. Utilities over there are almost non-existent. They don't even want utility upgrades over there, even in the floodplain site, which is west of the track. So there's some issues there, which will all end up costing us more in the end.
Yep, so please let us know when it's a convenient time to set up this workshop, and happy to do it.
Thank you. It won't be in the next 2 weeks.
I think you'll be busy, yes.
Or the next month. Won't be
Anyway,
in the next month.
any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I already saw that it was canceled.